Hello and welcome back to Lorcana Villain. My name is Baker, and today is our next interview on the channel. I had the pleasure of getting to sit down and talk with Kendall Burdette, also known as Actual No I'm Not on social media. This is a player we've talked about a lot on the channel, mostly because they keep making top cut at Lorcana events since the first chapter, and they are a Ruby Amethyst enthusiast. I think nearly every single top cut victory that they've attained has been with Ruby Amethyst, and yeah, it was super interesting to get to sit down and have a chat with Kendall. So I'm going to waste no more time. A quick shout out to the channel sponsor, Cardmarket. If you're looking for Lorcana singles at competitive rates, then check out Cardmarket. But let's jump straight in and have a chat with Kendall. And here is the man himself, the Ruby Amethyst mastermind. It is a pleasure to have you here, Kendall, in the lair. I'm sure a good amount of my audience is already familiar with you and your accolades, but for the sake of those that may not know, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself with an emphasis on your history in TCG and what got you into Lorcana and when?
Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name's Kendall, aka No I'm Not. So see results under those two names, I guess. I've been playing Lorcana since the beginning of set one, but prior to that, my largest history in TCGs was from Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Probably played that competitively off and on for 12 or 13 years. I had a little success in it. Like I went to 3 Pro Tours
Mm-hmm.
and I had some success on the Star City circuit as well. Um, that's the main TCG I played, but I do like playing all TCGs. I
Mm-hmm.
try to at least try them at least
Cool.
once. Just the thing I find interesting about other TCGs, especially coming from Magic, is I like to figure out how their resource systems work. You know, Magic has lands, we have ink, just different things. So I've played a handful of games. Like I've played Flesh and Blood, I've played Force of Will, I've played the Final Fantasy card game, Dragon Ball Super. I've pretty much played every game in some capacity, probably except Yu-Gi-Oh. But yeah,
Which is funny because that
I
that
just
is my that is the only other card game. Well, no, that's a lie. I played Pokemon TCG for a bit, but my
mhm.
origins was Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm going back like 10, 15 years now, back to the very beginning of the game. But that was my introduction to Yu-Gi-Oh. So interesting that that's one you never picked up. Can I ask why? Was it just another something that caught
I
your eye?
yeah, it just never caught my eye. I played it a little as like a well, I didn't play it. As a teenager, I had the cards and I watched the show, but I didn't really know how to play the game.
Yeah,
But just when I got older, like when I was in the military prior and
right.
getting out from there, I started with Magic. And then when I was off of Magic a little bit, I'd try some of these other card games, and it was never pick up Yu-Gi-Oh at that
Fair.
time. Just never really got into it. So
No, that's fair enough. And again, like I'm talking about long time ago. I'm not a fan of the modern game, but you seem to have picked up an awful lot over your time, and you draw a particular point to the resource system, which is something that I see many Lorcana players compliment all the time from these various backgrounds. And yeah, it seems like if an interesting resource system is something that you enjoy in a TCG, then Lorcana seems to be working out pretty well for you.
yeah, again, I think the ink system is great,
Mm-hmm.
and the mulligan is great for Lorcana. And then the IP on top of it, great. So I don't know. I enjoy a lot of stuff about this game. I've been having fun playing it.
That's
So
awesome. That's good to hear. And yeah, you're a name that we've talked about a lot on the channel, and I've got a long list of players and content creators that I want and have for a while have wanted to get the opportunity to sit down with, whether it's one-on-one or in a group format. And you're a name that's been on that list for a while. It's just a matter of like finding the right point in time and scheduling and stuff. So I'm very pleased to have you on because I know that, much like myself, you are something of a Ruby Amethyst enthusiast. Would that be fair to say?
yeah, I think if you looked up all my results, it's on Ruby Amethyst. I have not registered probably any other deck in a competitive setting other than DLC Chicago, and that's where I played Blue Steel. I just can't seem to get away from it. I don't know. As long as it's good and viable, I'm probably playing it. So
I just can't seem to quit you. How
yeah,
much of it do you think is weighted towards? I think this is best decking format at the moment because I think that for every format that we've had, there's always been a strong argument to at least talk about Ruby Amethyst when you talk about best deck in format? And how much of it do you think is weighed towards that was your opinion, and how much of it was weighed towards just you like the play style of the deck, or even just the amount of reps you have with it compared to other things?
I would say in the first 3 sets, I definitely felt that it was probably the best deck. Like hands down, best deck in set 1.
Yeah.
Set 2 as well. Set 3, other stuff started coming up, but I still felt like it was the best deck. These last 2 sets, it could be argued, by the end of the set 4, it was probably best deck, but we had green steel there for a while. So these last 2 sets, I think, have opened up the format a little bit more to where there's not a best deck, but there's a handful of good decks that are great choices if you want to do well in a competitive setting. So now more so, it is one of the good decks, and I, at this point, am obviously comfortable piloting it. And it's still just always going to be a good strategy of draw a bunch of cards and remove as much stuff as you can. So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely.
And that is.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say that's just like been my preferred play style. Like in Magic, I played similar play style of just removal and draw cards and good on rate characters / creatures. It's my play style. You'll never really see me play an aggro deck, so I do like to play combo if that ever becomes a thing in Lorcana. But yeah.
Yeah, no, again, it was similar. Again, harking back to in my Yu-Gi-Oh days, my best format was something called Perfect Circle Monarch, which was just drawing cards and then laying big things like Medusa come into play, banish things, and just constantly having removal. And it's just a play style I've always enjoyed. And similar to you, I think it has consistently been, if not the best deck, then definitely in the conversation. But I personally have enjoyed Ruby Amethyst so much more in sets 4 and 5, where the meta has felt far more open. You are coming up against a greater variety of decks. And I think there's definitely something to be said for mastering one deck. And I have definitely put 90% of my time playing Lorcana ever into Ruby Amethyst. But I do try to go to the effort of trying other decks, because I always say this on my channel, like, even if you're not planning on running it, test it just so that you know how it pilots, how it operates, and you'll have a better idea of how to face it. Do you think there's something to be said for that? And do you put much time into playing other decks to get used to them, or do you find it's just enough to play against them enough times?
I think that can be a good strategy for you if you aren't really familiar how the other decks work. Definitely pick one up, play a few games with it, and see how, it's trying to like enact its game plan. I think I've just become comfortable enough in the game, played so many original reps on the deck that I kind of have a general idea of what most decks are trying to do to beat me. But definitely, yeah, that could be a good strategy for people that aren't so familiar.
Depending on your experience, both in TCGs in general and Lorcana specifically.
Right.
Let's move over to some of your more recent success. You've had success in previous formats of Lorcana. Like I said, we've covered you on the channel when we've looked at Top Cut Decklists, but it's been a very good couple of weekends for you, I believe, in your Lorcana CV, as it were. Now, we covered you when we looked at the 10K Charlie Collectibles show, where you were in top 4. I don't know if it was 3rd or 4th in terms of standings, but top 4.
Top 4.
Top 4. And I covered that, and I haven't gotten around to covering the events that have happened since then. I think there were 3 more, a couple of 1Ks and something else. So could you tell us, since that Charlie Collectible shows, what events you have done and how you performed?
Yeah, so Charlie's was literally like last weekend. The weekend right after Charlie's, which for now is this past weekend, I went to Tampa, Florida for SCG Con, Star City Games. They have, a big convention of TCGs where I guess Magic is mostly their hallmark card game, but they do offer events for other card games, and in there were events for Lorcana. So Friday there was a 1K, Saturday there was a 2K, and Sunday there was another 1K.
That's great.
Yeah, and Friday I won the 1K. Saturday I lost in top 8 of the 2K, and then Sunday I won the 1K again. So I tried to win 3 tournaments in a row, but yeah.
Hey, that's still not bad going. These were like sort of 60, 70 person events ish.
They were about 40 to 60. So I believe the Friday tournament had like 46
Hmm.
players. Saturday had 68,
Great.
and then Sunday had 31.
Yeah,
A
I
little
think
less
those are
people had a deck
perfectly
pool.
respectable sized fields to draw from. Again, we kind of get sport when it's DLC season because you're talking like 1,000 players, 2,000 players, and,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and hey, that's great. But realistically, I think 30 to 70 is going to be like 80% of your events overall. So that's still great
Right.
consistency, and you were running Ruby Amethyst every time. You made one change for one of the events. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so this is the same deck that I played at CCS. I
Hmm.
considered making some changes, but I was like, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, bend it until it breaks essentially. So run it until I have some bad results.
Hmm.
And yeah, I played the same list except Sunday I removed one of the Medusas for one Tremaine. So I cut one Medusa and played one Tremaine. This was just after it wasn't specifically because I lost to Blurple in the top 8 of the 2K, but it was a consideration because I knew that my deck had a weakness against blue decks in general, not just Blurple, but even blue red or blue steel, Sapphire Steel, Sapphire, Ruby Sapphire. Um, I knew that without playing any Tremaine or B King Undisputed, you could potentially, struggle against the blue matchups if you
Hmm.
aren't able to be aggressive enough in the early game. So yeah, I threw in the one Tremaine for the Sunday tournament, and it actually came up pretty relatively like top 8 again. I played the same Blurple player, and then top 4 and in the finals I played against Ruby Sapphire. And the one Tremaine in those matchups will come up quite often because those matchups are typically longer and you're drawing over half of your deck, so pretty good odds to just like find the one of anyways. And that's really all you need access to with the one of with the bounce package. Once you start just bouncing Tremaine if you need to, but.
Oh yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Like, did you find like you were seeing it consistently enough in the matchups and the moments that it mattered? But I suppose with just Ruby Amethyst, if you are drawing so many cards, it's one of the best decks in the game for doing that. You should be finding these pieces relatively soon, right?
Right.
You are not a fan of the B King Undisputed?
Not currently
Mm-hmm.
in the meta with so much like Steel Song
Mm-hmm.
and there's like Steel Song, there's a lot of Amber Emerald Song like discard as well that I
Mm-hmm.
noticed from this weekend. More than I thought the deck would be, as far as popular wise. So that might be a deck to look out for too. Um, but typically when there's more board like and even like Amethyst Emerald as well. Like typically not that great against those decks. I've given the tip that if I'm gonna play one, like if I'm gonna play one Tremaine, I'd rather it be a Tremaine than a B King
Mm-hmm.
because I have the ability to recur it with a bounce spell. However, if you ever start adding in more, like if you wanted to play two, you can play two Tremaines, that's perfectly fine, but you could start looking towards B King when you want to start adding more of those effects, I think. But if I'm only going to play one, I want to kind of have the upside of maybe getting to use it an additional time if I ever get to bounce it again.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'd like to pick your brain specifically about some of these cards and counts in particular. The deck largely looks the same as it did in set 4 format. Obviously, the big difference throughout the majority of that was there was a certain squirrel that was hopping around until right at the
Right.
very end. And I think really it was that prompted us to move to Brooms and Chernobogs as our one drops because like within a couple of weeks of the format of set 4, these were your one drops for Ruby Amethyst, and if anything you played, some people were just rocking 4 just like the 4 Chernobogs followers and just like going with the idea of I'm not going to play something unless it's drawing me a card against Bucky, and then I'm just going to fill out my top end a little bit more. And now that Bucky's gone, some players, myself included, have started playing around with other one drops, such as the Olafs or the Minis, which obviously can be super good into the Steel Song decks, just to help you retain a character, and they work great with the Crab. You often get a ton of utility, I find, off of a 1-3. The Rafiki's also popping up a little bit just to help you in your math a little bit against Daisy. And again, Rafiki was, I think it was set 3 really, where Rafiki was seeing most play. Would have been more relevant back then, depending on the actual meta. But like hitting 3 on a 1-cost character is still pretty good going. It helps you deal with bigger bodies and and locations and stuff like that. But you have stuck with the Chernobog's followers and the Magic Broom. Is this 100% where you're at? Would you have you considered moving to testing those other 1-drops, and if not, why? And why are these superior?
So I have considered playing a set of Olaf, particularly over Chernobog's followers, and I guess we can talk about that in a second. Why you would play that, and which one would you replace? The reason why I've stuck with these so far is mostly because of the library. Chernobog's and Broom obviously both have great synergy with the library, being able to draw 2 cards off of your 1-drop. I think Olaf is, if you are concerned about the Steel Song. So if you replace Chernobog's for Olaf's, perfectly reasonable. You lose a little less energy on the library, and I think that library is also kind of a flex slot. So the less energy you have with it, you could consider replacing that with some other card as well. Like, consider more Tremaine, Beaking, if it's 5-cost Elsa. Like, I think these are all kind of like reasonable cards. I think there are a few flex slots in the decks, the libraries being them. But when you're playing the full 8 1-drops that can trip themselves, it's obviously great with the library. Olaf has been a consideration for me. I just have not got around to it because this has just performed well for me so far. But I definitely agree that it's a reasonable add for you if you are concerned about Steel Song.
Yeah, fair enough. And like you say, if you are running these library, what do you think it is? It's you run the library because you want these to be your 1-drops, or you run these 1-drops because you want to run the library? Like, what do you think is the emphasis is on?
I think the emphasis is on the 1-drops. I am playing library because I'm playing these 1-drops.
Gotcha. Understood. So
I'm not playing these 1-drops because I necessarily want to play the library.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And again, I was going to ask you about the library and how committed you are to it. Again, it's definitely a strong location. It's one of the better locations we've had. I mean, obviously Queen's Castle still being the dominant one in my opinion. Obviously, Hidden Cove saw a lot of use in set 4 and is putting in a little bit of work these days as well. But yeah, library is definitely one of our better locations that we've had. And when you think of it in the respect of like, bouncing your Broom and your Chernobog and drawing cards, then you can absolutely get a lot of benefit there. I've stuck to the 4 Queen's Castle myself, and whenever I'm looking at lists and maybe like I see like a 2-2 split or a 3-3 split, my opinion is, and this is why you're here, please tell me your own opinions, tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. I'd love to be educated during these sort of sessions with players. I think the Queen's Castle, I think the fact that the clock it puts on the game is so much more significant. I have heard some talk about locations feeling weaker in general with this format because there's so much more crab about, and obviously Kuzco and Hideaway and things like that make them weaker. So I do think if you're going to play a location, it really does need to be that impactful. I think Queen's Castle, the clock it puts on the game from the lore is that much better, and the card draw is, you don't need to fill as many conditions to get the card draw off. Like, obviously, if you're just banishing through Chernobog's or Broom, it's quite easy to get something banished there, but otherwise you need either them to have an exerted character or for you to quest and them to be incentivized to challenge you as opposed to just racing themselves. So that's why in my head I just feel like Queen's Castle, all I've got to fulfill is moving a character there for 1 and then both of those cards surviving till my turn, which just seems like more of a benefit if I'm going to include these castles. Thoughts?
Yeah, I at the beginning of the set I played 3 castle, 2 library, and I quickly realized that my main reason for that was there was the concern of all of the additional removal hate that we got for locations like Hideaway or Cusco, and even the Steel Simba as well.
Yeah.
It's Simba, right?
Yeah, it's Simba. Yeah, it's Simba.
Yeah, Simba. So it was like, oh, there's all this extra location hate. Like, do we even play locations anymore? Is it just going to get, hated out? But in playing, I quickly realized that it doesn't matter if they one, they have to have these cards, and 2, if they don't, the card's still just polarizing in that this is like one of your win conditions. This is how you like win the game a lot of times. So yeah, I quickly went down to like 4 castle, 1 library. And then eventually I removed the library completely. And these past few weeks, like it's just back just because I wanted to try it out
Yeah,
more.
for sure.
But yeah, Queen's Castle still great. I still probably like one of the best locations in the game. And oftentimes your win condition. So that for me is not really a flex slot right now. I think you should definitely be playing 4, regardless of how many libraries you want to play. Like it's 4, and then you start looking at libraries.
Yeah, no,
Um,
no, seems like a very fair ad. If you were to go on to the Olaf, as you said that you might consider that it might be a consideration, would you consider
mhm.
the Teeth and Ambitions? Do you think that has much of a place in format at the moment?
Teeth would only really be a consideration for a lot of hyper aggro, a lot of Amber Amethyst hyper aggro, but that really hasn't seemed to be an issue this format.
Hmm.
People bring up, it was great against Steel Song early on, like set 3. However, I think Steel Song has just got so many more tools now that a lot of times, they're not even relying heavily on their shift lines. Like it can hit the 1-drop Cinderella, but there's also just lines that Teeth doesn't really help you. If Steel Song opens up Daisy, a lot of them have been cutting that, but let's say they play Daisy into Ursula into Pete or Ariel, and then they play Naveen on 4. Like Teeth and Ambitions was not helping you in
Mm.
any of those spots. So I'm not. I think I was like one of the biggest fans of Teeth, like in set 3. I played Teeth when a lot of people weren't, and I just don't really think it's that great of an inclusion right now.
So I was enjoying it in set 4, obviously Diablos. Obviously,
Hmm.
if they're at the Cove, that can mess it up, but it was helping out a lot with that. But also, where I was finding a lot of use for it was just taking out the opposing Flynn in the mirror. Like, as if they get Sisu and you don't, or even if you both get it, but they're able to reduce their hand in a better way than you. This is a problem I find that comes up in the mirror match. And maybe we can use that
Hmm.
as a way to segue into your thoughts on the mirror match precisely. But starting with that as a potential, like, do you worry about the opposing Flynn in the mirror match?
Only mostly, and there's a couple tips, right, that you can kind of do when you're on the draw in the mirror match. For instance, if you play your 1-drop and then you play Flynn Rider and Sisu, as long as you don't activate your 1-drop, then there are cases where your Sisu will be on power with their Sisu as well. And then hopefully, from there, either you go into a brawl or something like that, brawl or trade with their Sisu, and you kind of just match character strength. So I'm not too worried about the opposing Flynn Riders. Um, I guess there was a point in time at the beginning of the format where I was playing Cusco over Flynn Rider.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a fan of playing Cusco's again. I liked playing Cusco because of just pairing Cusco with Crab. And I kind of realized that again with the way the deck was currently constructed, and this was before I had the Tremaine, when you don't have these um, sacrifice effects for the Sapphire decks, you need a little bit faster clock. Um, I was still able to win games or matches against Sapphire, but Flynn Rider just trivializes that really. Being able to get 3, 6, or even sometimes 9 lore off of just a single Flynn
Yeah.
Rider, they're really weak to that. But yeah, in the mirror, I'm not too concerned about the Flynn because I feel myself personally, I feel pretty confident, and being able to just kind of like there's a little mini game, like the little Sisu mini game, in the mirror match.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to kind of like balance that, trade with their Sisus when you can, and then you can kind of stabilize the Flynn until maybe turn 6 when you get to Medusa. And then generally it's not too much of an issue anymore. But as long as you plan correctly, like I said, like the biggest thing is playing a 1-drop and then Flynn Rider and then Sisu, not activating your 1-drop, um, can help a lot of times. I see a lot of people do that. They'll activate their 1-drop and then they're 1 card up over their opponent because you're naturally, you're on the draw. So that's when it becomes a headache. So that could just be a small tip there, I suppose. The other thing too is don't be scared to like don't be afraid to like trade your Flynn Riders. Like typically you're not on a Flynn Rider game plan on the draw. So for instance, if they coast with their Sisu, don't be afraid to like use a crab and challenge your Flynn Rider into their Sisu. Like you're not going to be on the Flynn Rider game plan on the draw. So
is there anything else in particular concerning the mirror match, like lines or like, you know, real behind the scenes top player tips of things you look for in Mulligan, or like things you try and achieve by like, okay, I want this by turn X and then that's like my checkmate? Like any like real RP master, like I should be paying for this content sort of stuff.
oh, I say these things. I don't think there's like anything too crazy, right? I think the mirror match a lot of times will come down to your rabbit. So a lot of times I will protect my rabbit at all costs. I always pretty much will run the one out there on turn 4. The only time I really expose my rabbits later on in the mirror match is if like I have an additional one in my hand. I'm okay without losing that one, for instance. And to that same note, like I will always prioritize taking out their rabbit if I can, like with a brawl or Medusa or something like that. Always, you know, if they run out 2 rabbits, like that's like a okay time to be prepared. It doesn't feel like a great be prepared, but a lot of times, like if they don't have additional rabbits, and you know,
just falls apart.
yeah, it's it's probably pretty known now, but yeah, rabbit and friends on the other side are like the biggest things in the mirror. And then basically in the mirror, like once you've established just card advantage, you move into the late game and you're trying to essentially just set up an empty board with locations. So always try to get in an empty board position, like making trades to the board and then playing out castles, protecting your castles with be prepareds. You know, you've drawn a lot of your deck. At this point, you might have a few be prepareds in your hand and just be prepared multiple times over, protecting the castles. Eventually, you're just going to end the game with goat bounce. So yeah, ultimately, like the first person to be prepared is generally the one that's going to be behind. And I will say that a lot of people pull the trigger on be prepared when they shouldn't. And you should consider it if you don't have an answer for their locations. If you don't have a good follow-up, a good answer in your hand, like let's say you don't have Crab Maui in your hand when you're going to be prepared, you might want to, you know, consider not doing that and trying to make some favorable trades on the board, or using a brawl, playing a Medusa, make a trade on the board, play a couple characters, force them to be prepared to you first, because a lot of people will be prepared the board just because it looks good, and then that's when you get in the mirror match, you get locations dropped on you, and you're just going to lose the game that way because now you have no answer to the locations. So you're like, okay, I'll play a couple characters out, and then you start getting be prepared, and yeah, typically that's how you will lose. So
yeah, that's something after locations came out, I had to learn the hard way, is to get into this mind frame of whenever you want to be prepared, can I respond to double castle drop here if I play this? So
right.
yeah, no, that's a great tip to bring up. And one last thing to with emphasis on this list. So I was all like, as most players were, like brawl was compulsory in set 4. I think the general vibe was we didn't want to play it. You kind of just felt like you had to as a response to certain things. And when set 5 came about, well, more so when we lost Bucky, and I was asking these questions of like, okay, does this mean we see less Diablo and less XYZ? Like, do we have to play 4 still? Can we go down to 3? Can we cut them completely? I'd love to cut them completely. And then first few sets of list, seeing a lot of Steel Song doing well, seeing people trying to jam the new Robin Hood, the 1/4 that lets you play an action off the top of your deck, discard top 4, and I was like, I can't let people get away with that. We're playing 4 Brawl, at least until that goes away. But I was recently advised by a former Disney Lorcana Challenge finalist that consider cutting the Brawls. The reason being that it feels like there's never a good time to play it. How do you interpret that?
I have still found good times to play it. Brawl does not feel great to play a lot of times. I think it, like you said, it's kind of just a necessary evil.
Necessary evil, there you go.
How many you can get away with cutting at most would probably be 2. I would maybe only cut 1. And The only time I'm considering cutting brawls is if you're including the addition of the Elsa 5, really.
Hmm.
And I have seen some lists that like completely cut, they were like, you completely cut Brawl and throw in Elsa 5. Well, it kind of answers the same threats, some of them, and you have a little more utility out of the Elsa. However, what you're doing there is also, you're changing the curve quite a bit from removing the 3 cost with, a 5 cost. So,
Hmm.
um, it can be a little clunky because, if you just have a bunch of Elsa 5s, just playing an Elsa on 5, that can be good in like some matchups, but I feel a lot of times like I say this a lot, that our best turn is turn 5, when we don't have to play a Maui, because we get to do, multiple actions
Hmm.
in a turn that early on. So meaning we get to sing friends, bounce it with the snake, or sing friends with rabbit, bounce it with the snake, brawl one of their
Yeah.
characters, or play an additional 3-drop like Sisu. It's okay to even play a crab, or maybe you play a fox, had an additional 1-drop sitting in play. Play a fox. Fox also challenges into something. So like turn 5 is a pretty big turn for us when we don't have to play Maui. So like if you're completely removing Brawl and your turn 5 is just Elsa and or Maui now, like that can be okay against some decks, but not the greatest sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm still a
I see
fan
your
of
point.
Brawl. Yeah. I'm still a fan of Brawl. Uh, I'm slowly working towards like, okay, yeah, maybe you can cut one. Like the only time I'm cutting them is if Elsa 5 is an inclusion in my deck. And I think
Hmm.
that card is fairly good enough. Like that is a reasonable card to try to want to include into your deck, that include it in some numbers, like I don't know the correct number of
Yeah,
copies right
but
now,
it's a
you
fair
know,
consideration. Like, if you are going to cut a brawl, it should only be because you have decided you
because
want
you're
to,
playing Elsa
because you're
5s,
playing
right?
Elsas, because they do a similar job in a lot of respects. Which I see a point though. I like the way you put it, because Ruby Amethyst always feels good when, like you say, if you don't have to Maui on 5 or Medusa on 6, if you can afford to, as you say, on 5 do a bounce and a three drop or something, and if on 6 you can go rabbit snake, and like you can just spend those turns accumulating resources as opposed to having to answer questions. But yeah, I liked the idea of the Elsa when it was suggested to me, as you say, that it kind of fills a similar role, even against something like a Flavisham played late. You exert it on 5 and you deal with it with your 3 and your 4 drop in terms of challenging. So there are some nice interactions there that I found. But I tell you what, I've ended up missing the most since I swapped from Brawls to Elsas is Brawling the Rabbit, which is exactly what you said not too long ago, which can feel so important in the Ruby Amethyst matchup, just to take that away from them.
Yeah, being able to snag the early one before Medusa, because I mean, typically, good Ruby Amethyst players aren't exposing their
Yeah.
rabbits. Again, like I said, unless if they have an additional one. So, but I mean, in that scenario, Medusa or Brawl's not, you can't hit it out of their hands,
Hmm.
so you're just never able to target it. So being able to target it, on 4 or 5,
It feels slow,
can
but
sometimes be
it can be
helpful.
good, right?
Yeah, sometimes it can just be the answer that you need because that could be their only one, and they're hoping to be able to bounce it the following turn. Um, yeah, I think a little earlier answer too, like even against like Steel Song to brawl the aerial, keep them off
Yeah.
of a whole new world just for a turn or two to be
Hmm.
able to develop a little more, is also, pretty strong consideration for it. But in terms of like going against hyper aggro, for instance, you never really want to brawl the aggro deck
Hmm.
on turn 3.
Rather
So it's more
develop
of
a
a late
body.
game. Yeah, it's more of a like a late game spell when you're trying to stabilize. Like let's say turn 6, you play Sisu and you brawl something instead of like or Medusa, like if you had that. But in that case, Elsa can work out a little bit better for you. But there's just a couple. There's just too many scenarios, I think, early on right now that I would still kind of want Brawl a
Hmm.
little earlier. So for that reason, yes, you could probably cut one or two, but that's about as many as I would
Yeah,
cut.
that's
Really, I would say one, but maybe 2 if we're feeling a little froggy, I guess.
That's fair. Last thing before we come off this list, but kind of alluding back to what you mentioned earlier, we were talking about some of your counts, and you were saying maybe you would swap the 4 Chernobog for the Olaf. If you did do that, you said you would take out the 2 libraries. Where would those slots go? I know you said perhaps a second Tremaine, but if I was going to push you for take out the 2 library and replace them with 2 cards now, what would you go?
Yeah, so if you're playing Olaf and you want to remove the 2 libraries, again, I think it could be, additional Tremaine or Medusa. It could be the Elsa 5s like we spoke about. It could be an additional crab. So I think all of these are considerations. Like currently this list is at 12 uninkables, which I've really liked. But I think you can get away with 12 to 14.
Yeah,
so you can add 2 more uninkables here. You could play a second Medusa, a third Medusa and a second Tremaine as well, and you're still at 14 uninkables, which is perfectly reasonable. I mean, we got away with 16 in the last format, but we were doing some crazy things just because of mostly because of Bucky discard.
Yeah.
So,
you kind of just had to.
Yeah, but yeah, those would be my suggestions mostly. Is either like some number of Medusa, Tremaine, Bee King, or like Elsa 5. I think they're all pretty reasonable cards that you could include as well.
And then 2 just kind of techie, sometimes sees play, fan favorite options, we'll call them. Your thoughts on Yzma, Scary Beyond All Reason?
I like that card. I played it actually I think I played it in my last set champs, the last like week or 2 at the end of the format. I did play it. I won a set champs with one of we're talking about the 6 cost, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I played her. I mean, I like her. She's always been like borderline, like really good. I think, like especially in the mirror match, like in the late game, it can completely just kind of like open up the late game, because if you ever get to shuffle like a rabbit or a goat back into your deck, that's essentially like a 5th copy of goat or rabbit like back into your deck, and drawing 3 cards off of a Yzma feels really good. So yeah, I think like playing a 1 of Yzma, like if you want to do that, that's also, I think you can kind of get a little techie, like techie, like you said.
Yeah. If someone just like wakes up and they're like, I want 1 random card in here, that's kind of works. Yzma's a fair shout.
I think Yzma's always been like pretty
solid,
like a pretty good competitive kind of like option that kind of like can throw people off, or you can use it pretty well sometimes.
Yeah, and I've always said like sometimes just the element of surprise is a big thing in like high level tournaments, just because like not many people can see that coming. And then the other one is probably not as good as Yzma realistically, but my boy Jim Hawkins, especially with your 6th location here, something for a bit of fun. Any competitive viability right now at all, or?
Yeah, I like the Yzma a lot more.
Yeah.
I think someone asked me this past weekend about Jim Hawkins. The more locations we play, obviously Jim Hawkins is a little better. So the library I think is good enough because I don't think you don't really want to play Jim Hawkins in your deck with just 4 castles, right?
Yeah.
So then people were trying to really make him work by throwing like Agrabah in the deck. And Agrabah is not really the greatest. So something like library, I mean, it can make him a little better for sure. I like Jim Hawkins. Like I played 4 of him at the very beginning of set 3 when he first came out. And for Ruby Amethyst in particular, I don't think he's quite there yet. We would probably want, if we get another location as strong as Castle, like then I think we're looking at Jim Hawkins a lot more.
Yeah, I have no doubt he will make his way back into meta at some point. It's like it's one of these things. Like it is so clearly a powerful card. We just don't have the cards to fully support it yet. But no, super interesting. Now we are only a couple of weeks away now from the next DLCs. Are you going to be attending?
Yep, I will be going to Vegas next week.
Amazing.
I think it's literally next weekend. I'm heading out to Vegas. I'll be there early. I'll be there early, so I'll be there Wednesday. So if you see this, if this video is out before then,
It will be, yeah.
you know, reach out to me if you want to say hey or something prior to the tournament. I'll be chilling in Vegas for a couple days, and I did get a ticket to Seattle as well, so I'll be
I
at
was
the.
I was
those
going
two.
to ask what are your plans over the rest of the year for other events? So Vegas, and then people will see you in Seattle if they're there.
Yep, and I will be at Continentals as well because I qualified for that. So
Absolutely incredible. Kendall,
I
it's
have a lot
been
more Lorcana left.
a lot more Lorcana left in you. That's what we like to see. My man wants a championship trophy, and I sincerely hope you get it, man. Honestly, you're known as one of the, you're a very well respected player. You're a name I see come up a lot, and your win record complements that as well. Where can people find you? And I know that I don't know if it's a Patreon or if it's like a, you have like a document on how to play Ruby Amethyst, which people can buy as well. Please do feel free to advertise that.
Yeah, my Twitter is actual. No, I'm not. And then yeah, shout out to my team as well, Labyrinth, Team Labyrinth,
Mm-hmm.
Labyrinth TCG. They have a Twitter also. I do have a Ruby Amethyst guide. Uh, Currently it's only updated for set 4. I will be putting one out for set 5, and that will hopefully be by the end of this week. So again, by the time you see this video, hopefully I will have announced that. I'm still trying to figure out a way of how I'm going to distribute it because last time was probably it was not thought out enough by me as much demand as there was for it. But
There you go.
I was definitely happy that it helped as many people as it did because that was totally unexpected.
Yeah, it must feel good though, right? You know, that meant to know that many people in the community have not only like trusted you enough to like, you know, purchase this document, but benefited from it, and like I'm sure gone on to perform well in their set championships, DLCs. Like that's got to feel pretty good, right?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely felt good like this past set champs as well because I did really well in the Stitch set champs.
Mm-hmm.
Not as well. I still did pretty well in the Ursula ones, but the times when I was not doing well in the Ursula ones and I'd open up Twitter and they'd be like, "Oh, I just spiked this tournament thanks to No I'm Not for his guide and the
Yeah.
Decklist and stuff like that." So it's like even when I wasn't winning, I was kind of winning, and
Yeah,
that felt good.
No, that's awesome, and yeah, we'll
Yeah.
link your Twitter down below, and once you've got that guide, send it to me, and I'll link it down below in the video description for the sake of anyone that may find this video in a few weeks or anything. But it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anyone that you'd like to shout out? I know you mentioned Team Labyrinth, but anyone else? Anyone in particular?
I mean, really, it's all my team, really. Yeah, Team Labyrinth, and then the locals here. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, so the locals here, all y'all are great people, and yeah, shout out to my girlfriend for letting me play so many card games too, I guess.
Shout out to the partners that let us play card games.
Yeah, yeah. She doesn't get it a lot of the times, but yeah, she just knows I win, I guess, and
she lets you cook. She lets you cook. She lets you get on with it.
Yeah.
And that's it. Super appreciative to Kendall for agreeing to come onto the channel. Definitely one of the best Ruby Amethyst players in the game. And yeah, I hope you guys at home took something from that, from watching this, as much as I took from just having the conversation with, once again, another great Lorcana player. But we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all things Lorcana. Hit that like button to show support, and we'll see you soon.